Today we're here with Brooke Fawn. Brooke, I noticed on your LinkedIn you didn't necessarily start out choosing to go in the sports industry. You have an education degree. How did you choose to make that jump into the sports industry?
Yeah, so I'm going to give you a really long answer to what is a short question, but it's an interesting story. It's one that I tell often, and it's really it's meant to tell or to teach two lessons. One, never give up and never kind of take no for an answer because there's always a way. And two is if you go to school and you have like a sports marketing path and you even get a sports marketing degree, all of that is great, but you shouldn't rely on just that piece of paper to be like, oh, well, now I'm going to be a sports marketer, because there's so many people like me who don't have that piece of paper, but yet have some piece of paper and just have the will and the drive to follow through and to do it. So I actually started, when I started in college, I went to Ball State University, which is in Muncie, Indiana. It's home of David Letterman. And so I wanted to be the next ESPN girl. I wanted to be an Aaron Andrews. And, I love sports, love to talk, put them together. That's what I was going to do. And so I went to the David Letterman School of Telecommunications, which is one of the best in the nation. At the time, I was dating a guy who, started looking at some of the opportunities that I was getting, and they were, in California, and they were in New York, and they were in a lot of other places that wasn't our small town in Indiana. And he said, hey, like, don't you want to have a home? And, you'd always be gone and you'd always be traveling. And I made the very stupid decision to listen to him. So note to self, don't ever do that. And I was like, you know what, you're right. So I'm going to switch my major into something that's more stable. So I played basketball. I'm from Indiana. Everybody plays basketball that's from Indiana. And then got injured to where I couldn't play anymore, but I could coach. And so in order to be a varsity basketball coach in the state of Indiana, you had to either be going towards or have your teacher's license. And it was kind of a way for people to weed out and do background checks and that kind of thing, because teachers are under a lot of scrutiny. Like you have to be pretty squeaky clean to become a teacher, which is a good thing. And so I thought, you know what, I really like coaching, so let me switch my major to teaching, and then that way I can pursue, my passion of coaching, and, I'll teach too. And so I taught for 5 years. I taught kindergarten and was a varsity basketball coach and loved it. And then I came to North Carolina on what was supposed to be a weekend vacation. And 10 years later, I like to say I'm still on vacation. I fell in love with this area. I fell in love with the people. I fell in love with the weather. I don't know if you've ever been to Indiana, but it snows a lot and it doesn't here. And so I very quickly decided that I was just going to uproot everything. And I kind of call it my quarter life crisis. I didn't have a job, didn't have anything, and moved here. And I got a job teaching in Mooresville. And Mooresville, North Carolina is R.I.S.E, USA. It's where all of the NASCAR teams are, well, the majority of the NASCAR teams are located, and it's where the majority of like the drivers and pit crew and folks that work in the sport live. And so as a teacher, I taught a lot of folks in NASCAR. I taught their kids. And I didn't know a darn thing about NASCAR, to be honest with you. Indy is more of an IndyCar city. And, but I started learning from my parents, kind of what they did and all of the different roles in the sport. And this passion just kind of got relit in me of, I always wanted to do something in this world, and coaching basketball in North Carolina is very different than coaching basketball in Indiana. People can sit here and argue with me about Carolina and Duke and all this other stuff. Where do you think those boys come from? They come from Indiana. So the passion and the fire and just the pure athleticism just wasn't here like it was back home. And so I kind of lost that edge that I had of coaching, where I didn't have quite the passion for it anymore. And then teaching was always a means of being able to coach. And so there wasn't that like huge drive of like, I was always born to be a teacher, like many wonderful teachers have. And so I kind of just took a good look at things and was like, if there ever was a time to just blow it all up and start over, like now's a pretty good one, new city, and not a lot of, I didn't have a family, I wasn't married, like it just, it was just me. And so it's really funny. I was sitting at a bar by myself having dinner. That sounds a little pathetic, but it's the truth. And struck up a conversation with this gentleman next to me. And come to find out, he was the CEO of R.I.S.E, which is an all-natural grocery store. It's very similar to Whole Foods. And at the time, they were the largest expanding grocer in the Southeast. They were building stores left and right. And they were getting ready to build one in Huntersville, North Carolina, which is in the Lake Norman area. And I had lived in this area all of 6 months and talked about it like it was the life that I'd always lived, to the point where at the end of, now our dinner together, because we're having this conversation, he looked at me and said, hey, listen, like I, haven't even hired a store manager yet, but I'm trying to get involved in the community, and I'm trying to like bring awareness to the fact that we're going to be in the community. So I need essentially a community relations manager, and I want you to do it. Like, will you take the job? And kind of looked at him and was like, I'm a teacher, right? Like, I don't have a marketing degree. I don't know how to do this. And he was like, no, you know how to do this. So I did. I stopped teaching on like a Thursday, school was out, and I took, my summer break was like a week. And then I started in at R.I.S.E. And with doing R.I.S.E, with the connections that I had in the NASCAR world now, because they were my former parents, a lot of them were on pit crews. And the pit crew at this time was kind of transitioning from the pit crew of like the 90s and early 2000s of like, they smoked marbles and drank Bud Light, and not even Bud Light, they drank Bud Heavy, and the guys were just big old boys that, was like, throw your cigarette down and throw the tire over the wall, to the pit crews of now, which, I mean, they are purebred athletes. Like, these guys are all former college football players, college hockey players, baseball players, and they are in shape better than I ever will be. And they were, a big piece of that was learning nutrition and learning how to eat healthy and fuel your body for the output that they needed to give week in, week out. And so at R.I.S.E, we started sponsoring NASCAR teams, and that we were just feeding their pit crew and teaching them about nutrition and hydration and sleep and, just the natural ways of doing things, instead of always like, popping a pill if something hurt, like how to just heal your body, truly heal it. And that was kind of my first foray into sports marketing, if you, would think of it that way. And then so I did that for a little while. And then I, in that time, got married, and had my son. And so when he was born, I took a little bit of time off thinking that, maybe I would be a stay-at-home mom. If anybody's listening that has a stay-at-home mom, that's the hardest job literally in the world. Second hardest job is teacher, first hardest job is stay-at-home mom. So I wasn't made out to be either one of those. And so I very quickly was like, you know what, life, I need to get back into the swing of things. And so I went to a networking event. At the time, it was called the GMR Charlotte Networking Breakfast. It's now the Charlotte Sports Plus Business Networking event. So I went to it, and I met a man by the name of Mike Boykin, who at the time, he was the head of the GMR Charlotte office. And I knew who he was because in the one semester of sports business that I had, he was in all of my textbooks. Like, he was quoted, he's in Sports Business Journal all the time. Like, he's a who's who of in the sports world. And so he was just such a gracious man, and he took the time to ask me, my story and who I was and what I wanted to do and, what I was doing to get to that goal, and gave me some really great advice. And so when I left that day, I said to him, I really appreciate your time. And one of these days, I don't know when and I don't know how, but I'm going to work for you. And he was like, you know what? I hope so, And no one on this call is going to understand this reference because y'all are way too young, but there used to be a show on Nick at Night, and it was called The Mary Tyler Moore Show. And Mary Tyler Moore was one of the first females to ever have a TV show named after her. It was her and Lucille Ball with the I Love Lucy show. Every other show was named after a man, Dick Van Dyke Show and whatever. She was one of the first females to get her own show. And her, like the song, that always came on when Mary Tyler Moore Show came on, it was this cute little jingle. And at the very end, it said, "You're going to make it after all," because it was the whole premise of the show was that she was in New York. She was in the radio business, which was a male dominated business. And she was just trying to make it, and so the song goes, "You're going to make it after all." And she does this little flip of her leg and she throws her hat up in the air. So really stupidly, I posted a picture of Mary Tyler Moore flipping her little hat up in the air on Facebook and put something stupid about today was a really inspirational day, or whatever you put on Facebook when you're, 26 and unemployed. And, just left it at that. So very shortly after that networking event, because of some of the connections that I had made at that networking event, and also when I was at Earth Fair, I got the opportunity to apply for a job at Novant Health, which is a healthcare system here in Charlotte, to run their sports partnerships. And I'm going to be honest with you, Mackenzie, I still to this day say that I have no idea how I got that job. I think it was that I didn't come across as a sports fan. I think a lot of people, when they're interviewing for sports jobs, the number one biggest mistake you can make is when someone says, "Why do you want this job?" And someone will say, "Because I love the Carolina Panthers. I've been a Panthers fan my whole life, so I want to work for the Panthers." They're immediately like, "No, she's out," because you can't be a fan when you're working, And Novant at the time, so they were Presbyterian at the time, and they were transferring over to the Novant brand. And then the team was the Bobcats at the time, and then, eventually transferred over to the Hornets. And they had a PSA with Michael Jordan, and they were the only regional brand that he had ever done a PSA for. And so they needed someone who was able to meet Michael Jordan and not lose their mind. And apparently I convinced them that I was that person. Although the first time I met him, I stayed very, very cool. But then I got in the car and I called my dad, and I absolutely freaked out. So I was very lucky to get that job. And so that's where I kind of cut my teeth. I managed the Bobcats, moving over to Hornets, which was such a cool experience. They also have a really great deal with the Charlotte Checkers, which is a hockey team in town. And so managed that. And then I actually, because of, again, my relationships, I got us into NASCAR, and we kind of became the healthcare provider for the families in NASCAR. And we kind of came up with some creative ways to do that. And so I kept going back to that networking breakfast and kept going to see Mike and everyone on a monthly basis. And one month, it was about the time for the networking breakfast, and I get a phone call from a friend, and he said, "Hey, I just need to let you know, Mike left today. He's no longer at GMR." And I said, what do you mean? That he made that place, I don't understand. And he was like, I don't really know what's going on. Maybe you should call him. So I give it a couple of days, and I call him, and I said, "Hey, I don't know what's going on. I know, legal stuff, you can't really talk about it, but just know I'm here for you." And he goes, "What are you doing today after work?" And I said, "Nothing." He said, "Come meet me for a beer." I said, "Okay." And he shot me the address of a place that he wanted me to meet him at. And I don't know Charlotte very well. I live up in the Lake Norman area, so I only come down, I come to work and straight back. Don't mix and mingle a lot. And so it didn't alarm me that the address that he shot me was not a restaurant. I didn't put the two and two together until I was driving there, and I realized that I was parking at what was a giant like warehouse, almost like abandoned building, like, you know, what you see in haunted houses kind of things. And I'm like, you know what, like, I don't know this man that well. Like, you know, I mean, we've met at networking events and I like him all right, but like, maybe I should have like asked a couple more questions, because, you know, this is like straight off of like, you know, the dumb blonde walking into an empty warehouse and then the man kills her and everyone's like, how did she not see it, you know? And so I kind of like walk in and, you know, eyes kind of wide open, you know, hello. And the walls are missing and wires are hanging and carpet's like half there and paint's like all over the place and it's a hot mess. And there's Mike and another gentleman by the name of Greg Bush, and they said, hey, and I said, I thought we were getting beers. And he points to a cooler that's open and it's got like a 6-pack of Miller Lite in it. And they've got like the chairs from like Academy that are like the sports mom chairs, you know, just the fold out that you like watch your kid's soccer game on, you know, and that was our seating area. And they're like, have a seat. And I'm like, all right, you know, so I sit down and they just look at me and they go, you know, welcome to Bespoke Sports and Entertainment. And I'm like, what are y'all talking about? You know, like I just see a bunch of missing walls and wires, like what's going on? And they just kind of lay it out of, you know, they come from big agencies and there's a lot of pros working for a really, really big group, but there's also a lot of cons. And, you know, after being there for 20 some years, they just got really tired of not actually doing the work, but just coming in if there was a problem, right? They worked their way up so high that they'd almost worked their way out of doing what they love to do and just dealt with issues, you know? And so they kind of talked through this new agency model and how it's, you know, big agency experience, but small agency touch. So you're always connected with someone at a higher level, not just when there's a problem, but just like from a day-to-day basis, and just different ways to think about things, because what works for one healthcare provider may or may not work for another healthcare provider. You shouldn't just pull the book off the ledge and say, here's the marketing plan for all healthcare providers, you know? And so they're telling me all of this. And honestly, I was thinking that they wanted my business at Novant, because I'd actually just hired GMR to be my agency. And I hired him because Mike, you know, I loved Mike, so I'm going to hire GMR. And so they get done with kind of their whole spiel. And I say, listen, guys, I get it. Like, let me look at the contract. Let me see how soon I can get out of it. You know, like, I want you guys, right? That's why I hired GMR. So, you know, I'll do whatever I need to do to get you guys working for me or working with me. And they're like, you know, that'd be great, but we actually, like, we want you. Like, we want you to quit Novant and we want you to come be employee number 1 at Bespoke. And that was shocking. And just a lot, because, you know, at the time I didn't have a ton of sports experience. Like, I really just had kind of a hodgepodge experience at Earth Care and then the Novant experience, but I'd only been there a year and a half maybe. And really it was just the Hornets. Like, we were so focused on the Bobcats becoming the Hornets, and that was such a big deal in Charlotte that like all the other stuff kind of fell to the side. And that was like the big thing I was focusing on. And, you know, in the agency world, you do so much and in so many different sports. And so I felt, I don't know, I felt like I didn't have the qualifications, you know? And so I kind of almost tried to talk them out of it. I'm like, you don't want me. What about so-and-so? What about so-and-so? And they're like, no, listen, we've, you know, thought about this a lot, and, you know, we want you. And so I said, well, I have to think about it and talk it over with my family. So I get home that night, and my son at the time was 1.5. Yeah. And, you know, there's a lot that comes with raising a baby, and a lot of time commitment that goes that direction. And so I just said to my husband, like, you know, here's what happened, but like, it's just going to be too much. I can't travel. We have a baby, you know, and I can't devote my life to clients. Like, I need to be here for you guys. And, you know, just I had all of these excuses of why I couldn't do it. And my husband, God bless him, you know, he was like, okay, like, just think about it, you know, like, don't make up your mind, yes or no, just sleep on it. So I slept on it, slept like crap. And the next morning, I just had so many thoughts in my head and going back and forth so much. So I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna open up social media and just like look at something that doesn't take thought. And before Facebook had their memories section, there was this app called Time Hop that basically did the exact same thing, but it would pull from all of your social media. So like Twitter, Instagram, you know, MySpace, like that was back in the day, you know, but like anything that you posted across any of the social platforms, then, you know, Time Hop would be like, 1 year ago, you said this, and 2 years ago, here's where you were, and all that. So I open it up, and 1 year ago today, there's freaking Mary Tyler Moore throwing her hat up in the air. I cannot make this up. Like, I can't. And I'm a very big believer in signs, and everything, you know, happens for a reason. And I'm also an incredibly emotional person. I never was until I had a kid. And then, like, I don't know, man, you have a baby and all of a sudden you just can't stop crying. And so I started crying very, very hard. And my husband walks in and he's like, why are you crying? And I'm like, Mary Tyler Moore. And he does not know the story. And so he's like, you're crying over Mary Tyler Moore? Like, did she die? I thought she died a long time ago. Like, he's so confused. And so I finally like stopped like hyperventilating enough to tell him the story of, you know, the first day I met Mike, I posted this stupid picture that wasn't supposed to mean anything, but here it is, you know, popping up in my time feed like 1 year ago today, as I'm considering leaving a very great job to take what is a risk, you know, a brand new company, a startup, all of these things. And he's like, you're going to take it. Like, I don't even know why you're sitting here like debating it. You're going to take it. And I was like, you're right. I'm going to take it. So I call Mike. I'm still crying. I'm still babbling about Mary Tyler Moore. He has no idea what I'm saying. And he's like, are these good tears? Are these bad tears? Like, what's going on? I'm like, no, they're good tears. And he was like, I'll take good tears. Good tears, and I'll see you Monday. I was like, okay. And so the crazy thing is I went to Novant and, you know, went to like turn in my my notice, and they offered me a promotion. They offered me more money. Like, they really wanted me to stay because for the first time we were really getting some traction with our marketing and specifically in our sports marketing. And I just said to them, like, I appreciate all of this, but I'm actually taking a pay cut to go to the agency. Like, but I can't put a price. I said, I don't know what's going to happen. Like, we could fold in a year, you know, but I just have this feeling, and I can't put a price on the experience I think I'm going to get. And you can't offer that. And so I need to at least go see, you know? And so they said, you know, absolutely understand. We wish you well. And so off I went. And so that was 6 years ago, Labor Day weekend. And I started as, I think my title was manager. I mean, literally it was three of us. We made up our titles, you know what I mean? And I did everything from like answer the phone and like take out the trash to like run, when we got clients, run our client business. And then I just started growing, and we started growing, and I found like this independence and this ability inside myself that I never even knew I had. And, you know, so I'm now the vice president of our client experiences department. And so it's just a fancy word for hospitality. But, you know, in 6 years, I've gone from being a manager that was taking out the trash to being the vice president and running an entire division of our company. And I just, so that was a really long answer to your question, but it just goes to show that a kindergarten teacher from middle of nowhere, Indiana, can, you know, now know Michael Jordan on a first name basis and do all of these amazing things. And it's all just in a little bit of luck. But I I read a book recently. It's called Untamed. If you haven't read it, you should. It's fantastic. And one of the quotes in there is, "The harder I work, the luckier I get." And so it really shows that, like, luck, you're not lucky. It's just you needed that extra little push over the edge, but the hard work that you did got you to that edge. So yeah, I hope that answers your question of how I went from a teacher to what I'm doing now.
It actually answered all 4 of my questions, so I had to come up on one on the spot. But
Okay.
I think it's a really great one. You've taken a lot of risk, I think, throughout your career. And one thing that I've always been told is take the opportunity that presents itself. Never say no. And it feels like you've really embraced that throughout your career. And I mean, I would love to hear how that's just helped you climb the ladder even more.
Yeah. So I always say risk, yes, educated risk, right? So yes, I was coming to a brand new company who had literally 0 clients. But the men that I were joining were 2 of the most respected men in the sports industry. And so by sheer will, they were either going to make this agency work, or they were going to be so grateful that I came over that they would like be on their deathbed and be making phone calls for me to get some job that I would have never been able to get by myself. And so, I caution people when, it's like, take risk, like educated risk. Moving from Indiana to North Carolina without a job was risky. But I also knew I just needed to get here, and then I was going to make connections, and I got a job within a week, and so, and I was moving into an area that was growing and that opportunities were often, versus where I lived, where opportunities did not present themselves very often. So I think, I think risk is just, it gets a bad connotation. It's a negative word for a lot of people. Educated risk is how I would put it, is actually what you should look for, because the cheesy saying, like, no risk, no reward, is so true. Like, I could have stayed safe and stayed in my brand job and honestly been really happy. I loved my job at Nova. I loved my coworkers. They loved me. They tried to keep me, but I knew that by taking this educated risk of moving over, my horizon was just going to be so expanded, and the amount of knowledge and experiences that I was going to be able to get over here that I would never be able to get at a safe brand was a risk that was worth taking.
Yeah, that's great. I know I've learned a lot today. Number one thing, never follow a boy's advice in college.
Amen. Write that down.
Happy to hear that. But I really just want to thank you for talking to me today. I know I've learned a lot. I'm sure the people listening have learned a lot, and I just want to thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm, on LinkedIn, and again, the Charlotte Sports Plus Business Networking event that I mentioned. If you Google it, just put in Charlotte Sports Plus Business, it'll pop up. I think it's like the first thing that pops up on Google. It's a completely open event, completely free event. Sometimes it's in the morning. Well, this is pre-COVID, right? So once the world gets back to normal, it'll be in the morning once a month at the NASCAR Hall of Fame. And it's more people like me kind of telling their stories and how they got to where they are and giving advice. And then we'll switch it. And the next month it'll be at like a brewery, but still under 21 people are allowed, just can't drink. And it'll be more of a networking and just kind of time with people and seeing folks that are in the sports industry in Charlotte. And I guess my last piece of advice is Charlotte is such a wealth of sports individuals. You just don't even realize how many companies are headquartered here in Charlotte that sports is like their number one job. And so, do your research, start volunteering, start reaching out and meeting people, and start kind of figuring out what you like and what you don't like, because if I would have done this at 18 versus at 28, who knows where I'd be. I'm grateful for my life experiences, and I never want to say, that I wished anything different. But if you can skip the quarter life crisis that I went through, it's recommended. And so, look into the networking events and reaching out to people, because there's a lot of friendly folks in Charlotte that are willing to help if they're asked.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you again, Brooke.
Absolutely. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.